Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where I explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by Perrine Farque, who's a TEDx speaker, award-winning inclusion and diversity expert, founder of Inspire Human, and author of the book Inclusion, the Ultimate Secret for an Organization's Success. Welcome to the show, Perrine. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Chris. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. How have you been? How are you?
Yeah, good. It's been a busy few weeks, month, of course, for book publication, but just in general, I think I've been doing a lot of workshops, virtual workshops recently, which has been great. So I'm super thankful to have been able to keep busy despite the pandemic and COVID and remote work. It's been a busy few months. Yeah.
Good to be busy, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that at the time, but you should be more worried if you're not busy. So
exactly.
It's a good thing. Before we get into the work that you do and the book and stuff like that, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and kind of your journey to where we are now.
Yes, I was born and bred in France, as you might hear from my accent. I'm a French citizen, and I studied law. I studied law in France. I was very interested in social justice and fairness, etc. And then I decided I was also interested equally in marketing. So I pursued a career in marketing. I started working in Italy initially for a few years because I followed my then boyfriend, now husband, who's Italian, in Italy, worked there in marketing. And then I moved to London, and I've been living in London for about 13 years. And I've been essentially working in technology as a marketing professional with technology and software here in London. Essentially, yes, as a woman working in a very white male dominated environment, I often was very interested in the topic of inclusion and diversity at work, which led me to do what I do today, which is essentially I help organizations create more inclusive, more diverse workplaces through consultancy and keynote speaking, etc.
Fantastic. So would you say then, so your interest and passion for inclusion and diversity was based on your own career and the experience and what you experienced personally?
Yeah, absolutely. It's completely based on personal experience, which, by the way, I'm very grateful for. I had a very interesting career in technology, in software B2B. It was super interesting. Met lots of brilliant people, but equally, I noticed there was a gap. There was an opportunity to improve things. Because like I said, so the technology space, the software space is very white male dominated. And that, of course, leads to a lot of things like there is less opportunities for women or mothers or people of color. And we've seen in the news a lot of discussions around, sexism in tech and racism in tech. And there is definitely an area for improvement here. There's definitely more work can be done. And especially, those big tech companies have a big responsibility to create a more inclusive, diverse, but socially responsible workplace as well. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately the products they create, the technology, I know you talk a lot about HR analytics in your show. We want the technology to be inclusive, to be for everyone. So it's super important that the workforce is diverse, inclusive, and ideas can flow. So yes, it's definitely coming from my personal experience and my personal career, yes.
Fantastic. And there are a lot of books out there, right, around this topic now. Obviously, not more recently in the recent years. What's different about the book that you've published and that you put together? What inspired that?
It's a great question. I guess a couple of different things. One is my book is very much about the business case, because I'm trying to address those in charge, business leaders, CEOs, HR leaders, the people who shape the company. And they often, as we know, deprioritize diversity and inclusion. Interestingly, one of the main reasons they quote for not prioritizing diversity and inclusion is they're too busy. I was reading a stat from SHRM saying that the number one reason why business leaders deprioritize diversity and inclusion is because they are too busy. In other words, they deprioritize or they don't really understand the business case. So my book is different because I focus on the business case. I focus on why should the CEO prioritize diversity and inclusion above other things. And so there's a lot of conversations around, obviously it's better for innovation, it's better for revenue, for profit growth, performance, productivity, employee engagement, employee retention. So my book essentially focuses on the business case, or why it's good for business, but equally it's super practical. It has a lot of step by step on how to create an inclusive workplace if you have zero idea where to start. And in fact, a lot of people, in fact, the majority of people don't really know where to start with diversity. They don't know the basic definitions, the basic meanings, the basic concepts, the basic things. So I keep it very simple, almost for someone who's never been exposed or made aware or educated on diversity and inclusion. What are the definitions? So long answer to your question, but essentially my book is different because I focus on the business case, and it's very practical, a lot of step by step. And in fact, at the end, there's lots of sort of, questionnaire assessment tools. So I try to make it as easy as possible for people to understand what this is all about and how to get started, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I'm glad I asked that question. Interesting enough, those CEOs that say they're too busy, those areas that they're working on are directly impacted by diversity and inclusion, right? You talk about innovation, and as an example, in that, the work that you do, if you have an inclusive workforce, you're going to have more innovative products, which is then going to impact the bottom line.
Exactly. So, and I think it's what it is. It's not bad intentions at all. I think what it is simply a lack of understanding and awareness. I think, when business leaders hear diversity and inclusion, first of all, it sounds a little bit scary or a bit overwhelming, right? There's a lot of fear. What is this? I'm not exactly sure what it is, and it sounds complicated, and it sounds complex, and I'm a little bit fearful. I might not do the right thing, and also I'm busy trying to sell or close, deals or increase revenue or growth. But I think it's down to really articulating, to your point, why it's good for business. It's going to help them be more innovative, be more creative, gain new market shares amongst new customers, more diverse customers, retain employees, have employees that are more engaged, productive. So that's why it's just about educating those business leaders, those HR leaders. That's what it is. And because I think today that's what it is. A lot of business leaders, HR leaders simply have never really been properly educated on why they should prioritize diversity and inclusion. And that's why they're too busy to prioritize it. It's just about education.
Yeah. You mentioned HR leaders then. Do you think that D&I should sit within HR?
It's such a great question, because I think I get this often. I would say that diversity and inclusion is something that should be spearheaded by the senior leadership, because by that I mean that the senior leadership team has the power, the authority, the influence to make real change. So it's really important that at least someone in the senior leadership team is involved in diversity and inclusion, personally involved. So again, because they have the authority, the power, the influence to move things forward. Because I've seen very, very often that when diversity and inclusion is sort of, it's outsourced, let's say, to HR, things get stuck in kind of a nowhere. It's kind of there, deprioritized all the time. It doesn't really happen. So having someone from the senior leadership team fully involved and sponsoring the diversity and inclusion strategy is really important. HR, of course, should be part of it, because obviously HR plays a big role in shaping the organization's culture through training, learning and development, etc. So it's important. But also all employees, so every single employee, every individual contributor should be aware, should be educated, and should somehow have a responsibility, because it's not one person's job really. It's everybody's job to embrace diversity and inclusion and make a difference. So in small ways, it doesn't have to be, a dramatic sort of complicated change of how you go to work. It's just small, simple things you do every day. So again, it's a long answer to your question, but I think it should be definitely someone from the senior leadership team. HR should be involved, but also I think every employee should somehow be committed and part of this as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. From a training perspective, then, you mentioned training. Do you think that D&I training works? Like, for example, unconscious bias training, we hear mixed reviews, even from our guests, of yes, it works, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, no, it's such a great question, because you're right, there is a bit of controversy about that. So here's what I'd say. For me, it's like let's use the metaphor of workout. I love working out, you know, like going to the gym, eating healthy. Let's say you want to lose weight. Let's say you're out of shape, you want to lose weight and be healthy. Would you say that, you know, going to the gym once would fix your, you know, fix your health forever? Probably not.
No.
But if you change your lifestyle, and if you make small daily changes, maybe with your nutrition every day, and you can have a long-term workout kind of planning and a personal trainer in the long term, that's where you're going to see results. And for me, I see unconscious bias training, or you can call it diversity and inclusion training, is similar. If it's a, you know, a one kind of tick a box short-term initiative, it's like, okay, you've had 1 day diet, you had one workout, that's a good start, but you need more, right? So it's a little bit like that. You need to have something that's part of a longer term strategy. And I really love using the analogy of being healthy, you know, becoming healthy. It needs to be something.
It shouldn't be a diet, it should be a lifestyle.
That's it. It's a lifestyle change. So to answer your question, does unconscious bias training work? Does diversity and inclusion training work? I'd say, you know, like diet and exercise, it will work if it's part of a long-term plan. You can't expect to have one and like tomorrow all your problems are solved. You need to have a strategy for the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and constantly check, because like diet, you could have a bad day and a good day, you know? So it's like making part of a long-term strategy will make it efficient and work.
Yeah. What are the sort of common mistakes do you think that companies make when kind of running or putting together their programs?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are quite a few, I guess, but if I had to list the top kind of most common one is like I said earlier, not having senior leadership teams sponsorship or commitment is a big mistake, because you are gonna have a project somewhere that's gonna stay stuck. It's gonna be deprioritized all the time, and postpone, deprioritize, and just not go anywhere. So not having someone from the senior leadership team committed to it is a mistake. Another one is focusing on diverse hiring only, but not retention. So in other words, you say, we want to have, let's say today we only have 20% female workforce. We want to get to 50% female workforce. So you do get to 50% female workforce by hiring more female employees, but then
they leave just as fast.
Right. You don't set them up for success, because the workforce continues to work in the same way. They continue to promote the same people. And so focusing on diverse hiring only, but not retention. You want to make sure that you have retention plan, etc. Those would be definitely in the top two mistakes to avoid with diversity and inclusion.
It's not even just the retention, right? It's actually reorganizing all of the employee experience and almost kind of reassessing everything to make sure that we don't have any bias built in to the system.
Exactly. So it's going to show up in the promotion, in the performance review, in the project assignments, glamour work. Is going to show up in employee engagement, in your employee engagement surveys, learning and development. So you're right. It's an opportunity to revisit everything, you know, your employee journey, and make sure that you've reviewed everything, not just the hiring stage, but everything that comes after hiring.
Yeah. So for everyone listening now then, and what are some simple sort of practical steps that we can take to create a truly inclusive and more successful business and culture?
Yeah, there are definitely a few. So I think one is, I always talk about the small daily acts of inclusion, right? So there are definitely small daily acts of inclusion anybody can implement today to create a more inclusive workplace. So one would be talk about the unwritten rules. So when I was an employee in one of my previous job in technology, I would observe my manager's attitude in meetings and use it as a clue to what kind of behaviors was expected in meetings. And it turns out that my manager would start a meeting without making eye contact, without good morning or how are you, just staring at the laptop and, you know, talking at me and no question. And so that kind of behavior then leads to employees mirroring that behavior. So when you start talking about the unwritten rules of meetings, for example, and you say, well, in our meetings, we start with hello, eye contact, we ask everybody how you're doing. And then maybe we share an agenda to make sure everybody has equal opportunity to speak. So talking about the unwritten rule, making them explicit, even things as simple as a meeting, what is expected of a meeting? Are we supposed to look at each other in the eye? Are we supposed to have an agenda? Are we supposed to give equal speaking time to everyone? That's one thing to look at, for example. Another area would be pay attention to the small stuff. So according to a recent study from Hive, women are more likely than men to do non-promotable tasks, or tasks that are beneficial to the organization but do not result in a career advancement, like taking notes, rescheduling the next meeting, or collecting money for the baby shower coming up, all these things. And so when you pay attention to this kind of small stuff, or who speaks most in meetings, for example, you can make sure that you monitor, there is equal, there is fairness in office work, for example. That's another way to create an inclusive workplace. And then things like giving every employee a voice every single day. So there is another study by a psychologist, a Yale psychologist called Victoria Bresco. She found that male senators with more power spoke more on the Senate than female senators. And so in organizations, it's been noticed as well that male employees tend to speak more often. And so, things like hosting round robin in meetings to make sure you go around the table and you offer equal opportunity to speak, or monitor, the dynamics in meetings. Invite the introverts to speak, for example, or even having someone whose task is to really being the host of the meeting. Those are all things you can do to give all employees a voice every day. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about educating your leaders and holding them accountable every day. So making sure you have a series of unconscious bias awareness. You invite speakers and you celebrate International Women's Day or Pride Day, for example. Those are all things you can do to create a more inclusive workplace every day.
Fantastic. I was going to ask you about the hybrid part of it, because obviously women in particular have been disproportionately impacted due to COVID. So I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think like everything, this shift to hybrid or remote work presents equal opportunities and challenges as always. So clearly the opportunity of hybrid work, remote work, it's a great opportunity for those more underrepresented employees to have access to the workforce. Think about working mothers who might have childcare duties. It's much easier for them to access working remotely when they have to do the drop-off or the pick-up at nursery or school, morning or evening. Think about people who look after maybe a sick relative, people who are disabled, maybe physically disabled, who struggle, or even people who come from an kind of lower income family and they live really far from the city center and it's expensive and difficult for them to go to the city center. All those people suddenly have access to work thanks to remote work, which is great. So it makes the workplace more equal. At the same time, as slowly the offices are reopening and now companies are going through hybrid work, we might face the problem of a two-tier workforce where people who can afford to, so to say, are going to be more present in the office, and those who can afford less to will probably stay at home. That will make people, typically it's younger men who are going to go to the workforce. And typically it's mothers are going to be at home, or disabled people are going to stay at home. And the issue about the two-tier workforce is that those who are more visible in the workplace, because they're just more physically in the office, they might get promoted more, they might get more pay rises, they might get the glamour work or the stretch assignment, which might lead to an unintentional discrimination situation. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not talking about intentional discrimination, it's more about the unintentional discrimination that might happen by default. So it's something to really watch out for, and especially HR professionals and business leaders should really watch out for that, because they don't want to end up in a situation where they're discriminating against people who have to work at home because they don't really have a choice. So it's about reviewing your policies, making sure that the way you promote people, for example, is not based on office presence or things like that. So again, it's a great opportunity, this remote work, hybrid work, but equally it could become a risk for discrimination if it's not proactively addressed. So it just needs to be addressed properly by HR professionals and business leaders.
Mm-hmm. I think we're only going to start to see the effects in the next coming years, right? As this unfolds, we're not really seeing it now, but there is already concerns for even for friends and family members of mine and business colleagues who are now at home, who some of which are already starting to see that they're missing out on opportunities or being overlooked because they're at home and they can't be there.
It's already happening. And the thing is, we know, as always, that COVID has pushed out a lot of women out of the workforce. A lot of women have been made redundant. A lot of mothers have been made redundant. A lot of non-white people have been made redundant because often they were typically in lower entry job positions. They're more likely to be made redundant than others. And so already the workforce became more homogeneous and less diverse due to COVID. And now that the offices are reopening, and even World Economic Forum found that the gender gap increased during COVID. So now is the time to press the reset button and build smarter this time around. Instead of just going back to the office, it's just building smarter. And like you said, a lot of people, let's say parents of young children, typically, you mentioned some of your friends and family, they might have to be at home because how difficult it is to do the morning drop off, the evening pick up at school, people who look after sick relatives, etc., carers, disabled individuals, etc. It's not that they're not going to the office because they're lazy, as I've seen some articles saying in the press. It's more that they have additional obstacles compared to others. So making sure we create a fair workplace, especially when it comes to promotion, is really key right now.
When you work with companies and leaders, what are you hearing now from them as their biggest challenge? When they come to you, like, Perrine, I need some help. What are the biggest areas that they're struggling with?
The biggest challenges is we don't know where to start. We don't know where to start with diversity. We know we want to do something, but we don't know where to start. Help us. Where should we start? What does success look like?
Well, let's jump in. Let's jump into that then. Where do we start?
Where do we start? I'd say, so it's a case by case. There is no one size fits all. It depends how much awareness they've had, etc., and what have they done. If they've literally done nothing at all, I always recommend that we start with an awareness approach for their leadership team. Very important. So we have a specific kind of workshop series.
What does that look like? What are you doing within that workshop?
So it would be a half-day workshop. We'll talk about the framework of a successful diversity and inclusion strategy, and also allyship, what positive allyship looks like, just so that all the senior leaders really understand the basics of what does diversity mean, what does inclusion mean.
There's a common language, right? Amongst
concepts, and also we remove the fear, because one of the big feedback I get from those business leaders after the workshop is like, you've removed the fear. We had a lot of fear before. We had a lot of fear, and your workshops have removed the fear. Now we understand the concepts. We feel comfortable enough to have discussions between us, and we feel that we have the tools and the knowledge to transform the culture of the organization. So removing the fear, and it's really important. And then ideally, we want to do something similar at the employee level, so employee awareness. That could be a series of live webinars around specific topics that they feel is specifically needed. Could be around microaggressions, unconscious bias, inclusive language, inclusive meetings, more for the employees. And then having maybe kind of a plan to keep in touch over maybe 12 months or 18 months, so I can direct them in terms of the next steps, because there are so many more things that needs to be done, right? So creating employee resource groups, creating a diversity and inclusion committee, creating a calendar of cultural events to celebrate, and so on. So that's typically where we would start.
Yeah, and these are all things that people can do that aren't, there isn't a huge amount of investment needed for those things that you mentioned.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the thing that's the most striking. It's not a huge investment in either in terms of budget or time or anything. It's just prioritizing. You're absolutely right. It's almost anybody can do that. So, but it's really I find in my experience once the leadership team has had the awareness workshop, it's just everything just happens, right? Because it's just they never had that opportunity to be made aware of why it's important, and now that they have the knowledge, like everything happens, right? So if you don't have that, if your leadership team has not been made aware, then everything seems to get stuck and not really be happening.
Hmm. When you was doing your research for the book and you were having conversations, were there any big surprises? Sort of anything? What, you know, what's the biggest learning
Actually,
moment?
yes. Actually, yes. You wouldn't believe I had a lot of what kind of moments when I was reading some statistics. I mean, even for me, who's very interested in the topic of diversity and inclusion, I'm still shocked. Like even today, when I research, sometimes I'm just shocked when I see some research. I mean, for example, I think it was for every 100 men that get promoted to manager level, only 72 women get promoted, or women tend to be, and it's all based on research from Harvard Business Review or McKinsey. I mean, serious researchers. It's not. And there is another one, women tend to get promoted based on past achievements, whereas men tend to be promoted based on future potential. And it's like, wow. And it's, a lot of these stats are really shocking. And I think one of the reasons they are so shocking is because today we live in 2021, and most people, we believe that, there is no more sexism, there is no more racism. We like to think we live in a
We
world
like
where,
to think we've come a long way, don't we?
right, we like to think this is 2021. I mean, what are you talking about? Gender inequality. I mean, look, I always looked after women, and the thing is, it's all the subtle, really hidden things that prevent us from bridging that gap. And often when I talk about sexism in the workplace, it's not a man saying women are not good at work, I can't have a woman leader. It's not that. It's the subtle, can you take notes at this meeting, or can you arrange the next team meeting activity, can you book the restaurant for a team meeting
Or
next
because I'm
week?
a woman.
Right, it's all the small things. Can you order coffee for everyone? Can you pick up that guest from who just arrived? It's the small things that add up, and that's what we call microaggressions.
Or
And
unconscious
so
bias, like.
yes, bias, but and the main thing that prevents us from bridging the gap is acknowledging that we have bias in our own workplace, because none of us
By
like to
definition, we
admit,
don't know, like.
right?
Yeah.
None of us like to admit we have bias. We all like to think we're good people. We all like to think we have good intention. It's probably right. Most of us have good intentions. So we don't like to say we have bias. But so many people don't recognize that they might possibly have bias in their workplace that prevents anything from happening. So back to your question, yes, I still get shocked when I when I research and I read statistics. I'm still, wow, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
When did that moment come where when you decided that I'm gonna quit my job and do this full time?
I mean, again, it was a lot of small acts of exclusion kind of that added up one after the other, after the other, after the other. It was not a big aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember in particular one of my last job where I I had flown to California, to Napa Valley. We had a big company kickoff event to celebrate the success from the previous year. So everybody was excited to fly from London, from Paris, from Sydney to California, spend a couple of days together, celebrating the success. And I just arrived, and as I sat in my hotel room to check, my calendar and see where I was supposed to be next, I realized by accident that I had not been invited to a Women in Business lunch by my own boss. And one of the reasons is because I was not, I don't know, VP level and above, and I had been asking for 18 plus months to be promoted. It was just another act of exclusion from another I'm not being promoted. for, possibly bias, I'm assuming. And it's just, that kind of kicked in for me. I thought, surely there is a better way. I mean, I flew from London to California and I'm here, and, we can't even be together for a title question. And it's just a small thing, and it doesn't seem like much, but it's, all those small things that
Add up, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your hope from people that read the book?
I'm hoping to essentially democratize the concept of diversity and inclusion, so that everybody feels like they understand what it is, they understand the concept, they understand why it's important. What I don't want to do is that, it's people think it's only for those who are educated, it's only for those who have studied, it's only for, a small niche of HR professional.
It's for everyone, anyone and everyone who wants to educate themselves.
For everyone to understand, also remove the fear out of diversity, because I want to remove the fear. I think there's a lot of fear around diversity inclusion, a lot of discomfort, a lot of, not being sure if I'm going to do the right thing. So removing the fear, open up the discussion in a positive way. I'm a fan of including people in the conversation. I think white men are great allies and champions, and we need more. I had amazing mentors, men who are amazing mentors in my careers, and I know bringing men into the discussion, white men into the discussion, I don't want anybody to feel excluded from. Everybody should be part of the discussion and enjoy learning. So my hope is to bring everybody into the discussion in a positive way, constructive way, to build a more inclusive workplace and society.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and super excited for you. Obviously, launching a book during this climate is never easy, but obviously, congratulations again. I'm super excited to read it myself as well. We only connected a few days ago, and here we are. So thank you for sharing your insights and knowledge. For everyone listening, where can they grab a copy of the book? Where's the best place for them to grab a copy? And also, where can they connect with you if they want to reach out to you personally?
Yeah, great questions. Amazon is the best place to rent a book. So if you just go on Amazon.com and you search inclusion, you'll find the book. And where to connect with me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn is probably the best way. I'm there. But also from my side, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here today with you.
I appreciate it. Without you, there is no show. So keep up the great work as well. For us, we're having an amazing guest, and we've covered a lot to digest. But if there was one parting piece of advice, what would that be? If you wanted to give that to everyone listening.
I always say, I guess two things. I like to use the term "change starts with you." So really, change starts with you. I think it's probably Eleanor Roosevelt who said, if you want to change something, start with you. And also, I always use this quote, which is, when you invite everyone to your table, they will bring everything to the table. So I believe it's true in your personal life and at work. And so that's what I want to leave people with, is when you invite everyone to your table, they'll bring everything to the table.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, Perrine, and I wish you all the best until we next catch up.
Thank you, Chris.